Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we are taking a deep dive into the K-12 mental health crisis.
Right.
And specifically, we're focusing on student anxiety. We're looking at a pretty detailed informational brief regarding a highly structured telehealth solution that's actually currently operating in Georgia.
Yeah, it's called MentalSpace School.
Exactly. And, whether you are a parent or an educator or just a naturally curious learner listening to this today, our mission is to really help you separate the pervasive myths about youth anxiety from the actual biological
Yes.
realities.
Just so important right now.
It really is. And beyond that, we want to unpack how, modern systemic support models are fundamentally changing how schools and families approach mental health on a day-to-day basis.
And I think it is a really critical shift because we aren't just going to be looking at the medical side of this today.
Right.
We're really analyzing that intersection of, well, healthcare, education, and statewide logistics because, understanding the biology of anxiety is really only half the battle.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other half is figuring out the real-world execution of that treatment, especially in a chaotic school environment.
Oh, I mean, chaotic is the word for it. Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of precision, right?
Right, for sure.
Like engineering almost.
Yeah.
You break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line. The doctor just points and says, there it is.
Yeah, it's binary. It's either broken or not broken.
Right.
And it's comforting, because we like things to be visible and easily categorized. But when you step into the world of pediatric mental health,
The x-ray machine is completely useless.
completely useless.
The
Yeah.
diagnostic landscape is just notoriously murky, which I guess brings us to the core problem as our source defines it.
Yeah.
Student anxiety is the #1 mental health issue in K-12.
Number one.
#1. And yet it remains just massively underdiagnosed. Now, if you follow this topic at all, you already know anxiety is a real measurable nervous system response, right?
Yes, it's strictly biological.
Right. Telling the student with severe anxiety to just, toughen up is like looking at a kid with a shattered tibia and telling them to just walk it off.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
I mean, it's an involuntary physical reality. You can't just wish it away.
No, you can't. And the issue isn't really whether educated parents or teachers believe anxiety is real anymore. I think we're past that.
Right. The awareness is there.
Exactly. The disconnect happens in how that involuntary nervous system response actually presents itself in, say, a busy middle school hallway.
Okay, so what does that look like?
Well, when a student is experiencing anxiety, their body enters a state of hyperarousal. Simply put, their neurological alarm system, their fight or flight mechanism, it basically gets glued to the on position.
Oh, wow. That sounds exhausting.
It is. And while we tend to look for, dramatic panic attacks or kids flat out refusing to present a project to the class.
Right, the stereotypical signs.
Yeah, the reality of hyperarousal often presents as somatic complaints.
Somatic meaning a physical symptom.
That's right. Physical issues.
Yeah.
Chronic headaches, extreme fatigue, gastrointestinal distress.
Jeez.
So think about a hypothetical 7th grader. Let's say you're a parent listening right now, and your 12-year-old is in the school nurse's office like 4 times a week with a severe stomach ache.
Okay.
Your immediate reaction is probably to look for a physical bug.
Oh, absolutely. I would absolutely think it was a physical illness. I mean, maybe it's a food allergy or, I don't know, an infection.
Yeah.
You aren't instinctively thinking fight or flight misfire.
Exactly. You take them to the pediatrician, not a therapist.
Right. And then, the child misses math class, you miss a morning of work, trying to get a last-minute doctor's appointment. The pediatrician runs a bunch of gastrointestinal panels, tells you, well, maybe it's just stress, and sends you home.
Right.
And the cycle just repeats. The frustration builds, and the kid is still in pain.
And that cycle right there is exactly why anxiety remains underdiagnosed. The brain and the gut are so deeply connected, so psychological distress manifests as very real physical pain. This is where the source introduces a critical tool. It's called the GAD-7 screening tool.
Okay, GAD-7.
Yeah. It's an assessment adapted for adolescents, ages 11 and up, that successfully captures these generalized anxiety symptoms.
So instead of running a million expensive gastrointestinal tests, you give them a simple questionnaire.
Right. And what's fascinating here is the mechanism of action.
Hmm.
When families are equipped with a self-screening tool like the GAD-7 right at intake, it dramatically shortens the time to treatment.
Because you aren't guessing anymore.
Exactly. It acts almost like a translator. It takes those confusing physical, somatic complaints and converts them into a clear picture of what's happening neurologically.
As huge.
Yeah, you bypass months of confusing elimination diets and medical runarounds because the tool flags the generalized anxiety instantly.
But let's say a family doesn't get that screening. Let's say they write those physical symptoms off as just a rough patch or, typical teenage angst. We know from the briefing that inaction is a very specific timeline
It does.
because kids do not just grow out of it without support, do they?
No, they really don't. The data in our brief is quite sobering on that front, actually. Untreated adolescent anxiety progresses into adult anxiety disorders 70% of the time.
Wait, 70%?
Yeah, 70%. If you ignore it, the neural pathways associated with that hyperarousal literally calcify.
Oh, man.
It becomes the brain's default setting for navigating the world. You are essentially locking 7 out of 10 of those children into a lifelong battle with clinical anxiety.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. You have that terrifying 70% progression statistic on one hand,
Right.
but on the other hand, the sources highlight the overwhelming success of cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT.
Yes, CBT is incredibly effective.
The brief says full treatment results in a 60 to 70% remission rate. Remission meaning the symptoms actually drop below the diagnostic criteria.
Exactly. The child functionally gets their life back. That is a massive success rate for any medical intervention.
Right, so I have to push back here, or at least, point out the glaring friction in this data.
Okay.
We have a condition that worsens 70% of the time if ignored,
Yep.
and we have a treatment that cures it, basically 60 to 70% of the time when applied. If you're a parent looking at that math, intervention seems like an absolute no-brainer.
You would think so, yeah.
So why is getting therapy still such a controversial or delayed decision for so many families?
Well, it's a mix of stigma and the fear of labeling a child, certainly.
Sure.
But honestly, it's mostly a fundamental misunderstanding of what CBT actually does, combined with just logistical nightmares.
Logistical nightmares.
Right. CBT isn't just sitting on a couch talking about your feelings. It's an active, mechanical rewiring of the brain.
Like physical therapy for the brain.
Exactly. It teaches a child to identify cognitive distortions, those spiraling, catastrophic thought loops, and it provides them with mental circuit breakers to stop the spiral before it triggers a physical somatic response.
That makes a lot of sense.
But it requires hard work from the student.
Sure, but the alternative is locking them into a lifetime of anxiety.
Right. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, intervention fundamentally redirects a child's entire life trajectory.
Yeah.
When a student achieves remission through CBT, you aren't just fixing a temporary school problem or, managing a disruptive kid in class.
You're doing so much more.
You are altering the course of their adulthood by giving them cognitive tools they will use for the next 60 years.
But here we hit that logistical nightmare you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
We know CBT works mathematically, and we know how it rewires the brain. But how do you actually execute that?
That is the million-dollar question.
I mean, how do you get an exhausted, highly anxious 14-year-old to a clinic across town at 3:00 p.m. on a Tuesday? The parents are working, the kid is missing more school to travel to the appointment. The clinical theory is great, but the delivery mechanism is fundamentally broken.
And that's the exact gap the MentalSpace school model is trying to bridge.
Okay, tell me about that.
Well, you can have the best clinical intervention in the world, but if the logistics prevent the student from accessing it consistently, it just doesn't matter.
Right. It's useless.
So MentalSpace School is a highly structured telehealth solution operating across K-12 schools in Georgia, and the cornerstone of their delivery mechanism is same-day teletherapy.
Wow. So what does this all mean in practice? The same-day aspect implies speed, which I imagine is crucial for a kid in active crisis.
Oh, it's everything.
If our hypothetical 7th grader's having a panic attack in the nurse's office, they aren't handed a pamphlet and put on a 6-week waiting list.
No, and that's the beauty of it. The resistance to therapy drops significantly when the help is immediate. They just log onto a secure portal right there in the school counselor's office.
That is incredible.
But what really makes this work is the ecosystem approach. Think about traditional therapy. It's a bit like trying to fix a car engine while the car is still speeding down the highway.
Oh.
The therapist only sees the kid for an hour a week, while the parents, teachers, and doctors are all operating blindly in their own separate lanes.
So MentalSpace is essentially bringing the whole pit crew into the garage together.
A perfect analogy,
Yeah.
yes. The sources note they provide dedicated therapist teams per school. They handle crisis intervention, suicide and violence prevention, family counseling, and even staff wellness.
Staff wellness. That's interesting.
Yeah, because if the teachers are burning out, the students will feel that friction. And crucially, the clinicians are licensed, diverse, and culturally competent. They are culturally matched to the student population.
Now, that cultural matching has to be huge for building trust with a reluctant teenager.
Oh, absolutely.
If the person on the screen intuitively understands your background, you don't have to spend half the session explaining your family dynamics.
Yeah.
You can just get straight to the CBT work.
Exactly. It accelerates the therapeutic alliance immensely. But the integration goes even deeper than just the therapist and the student.
How so?
MentalSpace clinicians coordinate directly with the school counselors and the student's primary care providers, or PCPs. So the pediatrician who is trying to diagnose that stomach ache we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
they are now in the loop.
Wow. So the school counselor is acting as the spotter. The pediatrician knows the physical symptom is actually being addressed through CBT. The therapist is fine-tuning the cognitive tools. And the family is receiving counseling to support the child at home.
Yes, everyone is pulling in the exact same direction.
That is amazing. It creates a unified front of care that is incredibly difficult to achieve in the traditional, fragmented medical system.
It really is.
But wait, I need to stop you there. Because a unified pit crew sounds amazing, but surely school districts are paying a massive premium for this ecosystem out of their own shrinking budgets.
Oh, right?
I mean, imagine you're a superintendent dealing with budget cuts and teacher shortages. You don't have millions lying around to build a utopian mental health network. Who actually pays for this?
And that brings us to the hard logistics of our brief today. Accessibility is usually where these grand initiatives fall apart.
Right.
But MentalSpace operates through the existing healthcare framework. They've integrated with virtually all the major commercial insurers, meaning families can use their existing plans seamlessly.
Okay, that helps.
But the mechanical game changer here, the thing that truly scales this, is how they handle Medicaid.
Ah.
Where?
Because the source explicitly notes that for Medicaid, there is a $0 copay.
Yes. And that entirely dismantles the financial barrier to entry for the most vulnerable students in Georgia.
Right, because if a family is struggling to put food on the table, a $50 copay for weekly therapy is just a non-starter.
It is. It doesn't matter how good the CBT is if you can't afford to turn on the screen. Taking that down to zero is the mechanism that actually democratizes access to care.
That's a huge deal.
Yeah.
And from a compliance standpoint, the briefing mentions it is fully HIPAA and FERPA compliant. Now, HIPAA covers medical privacy, but FERPA is essentially the educational equivalent, right?
Correct.
It protects the student's school records from being improperly shared.
Right. You need rigorous compliance for both if you are integrating medical therapy within a school environment. But let's look at what is truly driving the urgency and adoption of this model right now in Georgia. It's state legislation.
Okay.
Specifically, House Bill 268.
Ah, yes. The July 2026 deadline.
That's the one.
Imagine you're a school administrator looking down the barrel of that HB 268 compliance deadline. The state is mandating strict mental health infrastructure. You have to prove you were providing support, but you lack the staff, the funding, and the legal framework to do it in-house.
It's a lot.
That level of daily friction for an administrator must be immense.
And this raises an important question about systemic accountability. When state legislation like HB 268 mandates compliance, mental health support officially moves from being a nice-to-have luxury to an essential, legally required infrastructure.
But you can't ignore it.
Exactly. Schools can't just talk about wellness anymore. They have to provide actionable, trackable, compliant solutions. So a plug-and-play system like MentalSpace, which handles the therapist staffing, the insurance billing, and the legal privacy compliance, suddenly becomes the most pragmatic solution to a massive administrative headache.
That makes total sense.
Oh.
And the outcomes prove it's not just a box-checking exercise for the state.
Right, the data's there.
We aren't just guessing that this ecosystem approach works. The data in our briefing shows an 89% improved attendance rate
That's huge.
and a 92% reduction in anxiety, alongside an 85% family satisfaction rate.
I mean, think about the mechanics of why that attendance number is so exceptionally high.
Okay.
When you use CBT to treat the hyperarousal, when the student learns to stop the negative thought loop before it cascades, the somatic stomach ache literally disappears.
Wow.
The student isn't in the nurse's office anymore. The parents aren't missing work to pick them up. The student is back in class, learning.
It connects all the dots beautifully.
Hmm.
And for you listening who might want to dig into the source material themselves, or if you're an educator looking at your own compliance deadlines, the contact points listed in the brief are mentalspaceschool.com or via email at mentalspaceschool@gatherapy.com.
Yes.
Plus, going back to the power of that GAD7 tool we discussed earlier, there is a free 2-minute screening available at gatherapy.com for mental health tests.
I highly recommend utilizing that self-screening tool. It really bridges the gap between feeling that something is wrong and actually knowing how to label it medically.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's just tie this entire journey together.
Let's do it.
We started by looking at how student anxiety isn't a lack of willpower, but a biological state of hyperarousal, one that often disguises itself as persistent physical symptoms, like stomach aches and fatigue, leading well-intentioned parents and pediatricians down the wrong diagnostic path.
Right. We then examined the friction of waiting. We saw how ignoring the problem essentially guarantees a lifelong struggle, with 70% of untreated youth progressing into adult anxiety disorders.
That's just scary stat.
It is. But conversely, active interventions like cognitive behavioral therapy offer up to a 70% remission rate by actively rewiring the brain's response to stress.
And finally, we unpacked the sheer logistics of getting that life-altering care to the students. We saw how ecosystem-wide telehealth models like MentalSpace School in Georgia are dismantling the delivery barriers.
Yes.
They're offering same-day interventions, $0 Medicaid copays, and acting as a central PIC crew that coordinates with school counselors and pediatricians to keep families from falling through the cracks.
It really represents a profound mechanical shift in how we structure care for the next generation. We are moving from isolated reactive treatment to integrated proactive ecosystems.
It really does. Which leaves me with a final forward-looking thought for you to mull over. If same-day digital access to a culturally matched therapist can dramatically improve a student's physical attendance by 89% and drop anxiety by 92%, will we eventually reach a future where a secure mental health portal is considered just as standard and just as essential to a student's daily back-to-school supplies as a laptop or a textbook?
A fascinating prospect,
Thank
and
you.
honestly, perhaps an inevitable one given the data.
I think so too. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep learning, keep questioning your assumptions, and stay curious. Because as we've seen today, when it comes to the minds of our children, we can't afford to just look for the clean, simple X-ray. We have to be willing to wade into the murky waters, understand the mechanisms of the problem, and build the infrastructure to actually heal them.